Young adult life, I think, is characterized most poignantly as the search for truth with a capital T, or the search for meaning with a capital M. And meaning is kind of a goofy word, because if I was to ask you something like, what is the meaning of the word centrifugal? You could tell me, and you'd give me a definition. But that's not really what young people seem to be looking for. Otherwise, you could just give them a really thick dictionary and they'd be set for life. But that doesn't seem to be the case, right? Perhaps that's all people really want, but I'm guessing not. And if you guess not, then perhaps this video will be interesting to you. We get to play this sort of arbiter between two worlds. One is the subjective world that we know directly, and the other is the objective world that is always hidden. Everything that we can perceive is perceived subjectively. That's the only way that we can have any positive experience of anything. But our subjectivity, being merely that it is, given to us via sensations that are not perfect, can be it can be a tripping point. It could be the source of some great difficulty. Indeed, hallucination only exists in the subjective world. There is no such thing as an objective hallucination, right? There's no such thing as an objective error in thinking, or so forth. I want to show you something. I want to show you meaning. This is meaning. This, I think, is what people are really going for when they say they're looking for meaning in their life. The true nature of this kind of meaning might be less romantic than what you really think it is. Recognize it now? Some of you might. It's a toy. It's a McDonald's Happy Meal toy that was part of a series of hidden dinosaurs. There was one in a milkshake, there was one in a hamburger box. This is the Chicken McNugget version. And I had this toy, or one like it rather, on the floor of my bedroom as a child. And when I look at this, it elicits a feeling of childhood. It's so deeply meaningful to me that I keep it with me. I bought it here in Japan, actually. Japan is an interesting place to go shopping sometimes. One of the kinds of stores that you can find in Japan is a store that deals in nostalgic paraphernalia, stuff like this, where, when you're a guy like me who has a little bit of difficulty living over here, something from your childhood placed against the background of an otherwise stressful environment was very moving. It was very meaningful. But now that we seem to at least get one appreciation of this word, meaning, there's an important point to raise here. That little guy is not at all informative about the rest of the world, the shared reality. It speaks to an expression of my personal conditioning history, not necessarily yours, right? My physiology had conditioned something involving a McDonald's Happy Meal toy. And even if I could find someone else that says, hey, I remember that, it would still not be informative of the objective world. And so we come to the sort of irony of this whole thing, that young people are looking for meaning in such a way that they think it is informative about the objective world. They don't, not so much themselves. If they just want to know what's meaningful to them, well, they look at their old comic books that they had when they were a kid. They look at their toys when they had a kid, what they had when they were a kid, or whatnot. But the focus seems different than that. The focus seems counter to that. The focus seems, I want to know the absolute truth of the universe. I want to know it. I want to know not just what's true for me, but what's true. Period. The disappointment is that the search for meaning cannot ever be satisfied in such a manner. But there are ways in which we can trick ourselves. I think when we talk about the spiritual experience, I think, or the conversion experience, I think this is essentially what we're dealing with. It's not necessarily a history of conditioning, but it's an assortment of expectations that we have. It's an assortment of ideas that we have in our subjective world, that we harbor in our subjective world, that we see in a subjective way, or have reinforced for us in a subjective way, in such a way that we experience it. We experience it not just from our passive memory or our thoughts about, oh yeah, that's what I think about the world, but then something happens to us that we say, I make the connection. It's what I've been thinking about. Here it is, there it is, there it is, there it is, boom! And suddenly, Mazel tov. I'm a Jew, I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, whatever the case may be. So really, I think to be a responsible adult is to recognize that the search for meaning is really a search to understand oneself. Not necessarily oneself in context with anything else, though. Not the search for oneself in context with the greater world outside, but merely oneself, and it stops at the door, so to speak. Once you get that straightened out in your head, then you can be responsible in assuaging, anyway, whatever word it happens to be, your subjective world. And you can carry things like this around with you, or whatever your case might be, and look after your subjective self. Because regardless of how meaningless it is in context of the exterior world, it is very meaningful in context with who you think you are. And it can help you get through the day. And so long as you recognize what it really is, and that this is not close to God, this is not God, this is not holy, please someone tell me that, confirm this for me. None of you think this is holy. None of you think this is God, closer to God. It's meaningful. It is, no. It's meaningful in context of the individual. And so long as we keep our search for meaning in that context, we'll be much less likely to get goofy thoughts in our head.